Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke, and today's guest is Isabella Skrypczak. She is a lightworker, channeler, author of A Polish Girl in Siberia, and founder of Clara Healing, where she bridges ancestral testimony with trauma-informed practices such as somatic therapy. In this episode, we'll discuss how unprocessed ancestral trauma repeats across generations and reappears in contemporary conflicts. Isabella, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You interact with spirits, realms, celestial beings almost on a daily basis. When did that begin?
It's difficult to pinpoint to an exact moment in time. I feel that I've had this my entire life. And it wasn't until much later in life where I realized that these were gifts. And due to the traumas that I had throughout my life, I second-guessed myself. I thought I was crazy. I thought I watched too many movies. I thought I had an overactive imagination. The first very clear instance is when I was 6 years old. And it mostly came through my great-grandmothers that would come to me. And hearing their voices, smelling their smells, seeing things move in rooms where there was no person or animal. There were no drafts. And there were very significant moments throughout my childhood where I felt there was something else that was guiding me or that was communicating with me. But just with every other moment in the chaos of everyday life, I shoved it under the rug and ignored it because I was too overwhelmed. I couldn't really pinpoint what exactly that was. I thought something was wrong with me. It really started with 6 years old, but it wasn't until much later in life where it all kind of came together.
It's pretty common. How else is a 6-year-old supposed to deal with that anyway? It's pretty intense. So were these visitations from your grandparents and I think eventually your great-grandparents as well, right?
It started with great-grandparents, and then once my grandparents started passing away, which was later in life, which was in my 20s, that's when they started appearing to me. And that's when a whole host of other groups of ancestors started appearing to me as well from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And then I realized, oh, it's not just my ancestors I'm seeing other people's ancestors. I'm seeing other people's grandmas. I'm seeing other people's parents. I'm seeing ghosts of the lands as well. And it wasn't just spirits as well. It was the energy of a place. That's what really got to me from the very beginning, of not just seeing visions or shadows or hearing or feeling or smelling things. It was also something with the land and a space that I also felt.
I suppose we can assume these visitations, the ancestors coming through, that is a product of mediumship, is it not?
Oh, absolutely.
The ancestral piece, I notice, is starting to come up in conversations recently. Do you think there's any particular reason for that, or is it really just tied to the land, the area?
It might just depend on the land and what lineage one comes from. I have found in my practice, in my experience, that there's many ancestors coming into the fold in lineages that have for generations experienced discrimination or been marginalized, or who have experienced generations of war, genocide, slavery, where it's the amount of it being repeated so much has reached a culmination point. And the one thing that I express to the living, and especially when I'm doing readings with people or when I'm doing energy work, when one physically passes away, right? When the physical body shuts down and it dies, whatever the spirit has held on to carries it with it to the next dimension. So if one, for example, harbors resentments, ill will, or a lot of pain, it doesn't just magically go away when one dies. The soul has to let it go to move on. And souls can cross over into the light and come visit us again. And there's a certain amount that they need to let go of to get there. So when there are souls that have not let go of so many things, it stays here. It stays in this 3D realm, and it stays within the energy of the family field.
So it's like a lingering residual energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Is this the same energy that is not really an active ghost, but it's almost like a tape loop that repeats over and over?
Right, because it's just staying. It's staying, and then it's burgeoning, and it's added into it, right? And it needs to move. The thing about energetics is that it moves. It's fluid. But if too much is in one place, you're going to feel it. And also, if there's not enough of it, you're going to feel it. So we're at this culmination point in this world right now where there's so much added generational and repeated traumas, and it also lands in our bodies. So epigenetically, from a physical level, the emotions that have not been processed by our ancestors, it stays in the fascia and it gets altered in the DNA. So it gets passed on to the next lineage. So you have this energetic aspect, and you have this physical, genetic aspect. And so when one's soul really needs to let it go, and the ancestors have let go enough, they're here to help us. But they're also here to help us give insights to why we're feeling the way we're feeling. Because in motion are emotions. And there are primal emotions that we experience. But if we don't allow them to physically move within our body, that's where it gets lodged in certain places. So if not enough anger gets processed, for example, it can be lodged in the liver, and then people get liver issues. If there's not enough grief that is processed, it can land in the lungs. And so that's where, for example, asthma can become prevalent in a family lineage. Or there's things like, there's another form of anger, right? If you don't, or rage that's not processed fully, it can land in hips. So people get really stiff hips, or they get depression. Depression is very prevalent across many different families. And depression at the root, at the core of it, is unprocessed anger and rage. So yes, it's a form of energy work, but it's physical in the sense that it can get lodged into organs or into our fascia, which connect all the different aspects within our body. And I have the help of my guides in mediumship to pinpoint where there's like a hot spot on someone's body. And with the somatic therapies, I know how one can move it or visualize or meditate or do breath work to unlock it and it be released.
So the somatic therapy in conjunction with your mediumship is like being a therapist on steroids, because you have additional tools that can get to the problem just a little bit quicker. Let's talk about some of the visions specifically that I think you got from your grandparents and your great-grandparents. There was a shared vision which had to do with the suffering of the Jews during World War II.
So just to give some context, I'm Polish American. I was born in Houston to Polish parents, and throughout my childhood, throughout the summers, they sent me to Poland to spend time with my grandparents, my cousins, my uncles. And whenever I was there as a child, I felt drastic energy shifts from one place to another. So I'll give you an example. I would be walking in the woods, and so you have this beautiful, lush forest that is just teeming with life. And then you take a turn, just going down a path or in the wilderness, and all of a sudden you stop in your tracks, and you feel this, oh, there's a lot of people here, but I don't see anybody. And then you see the land, the dirt is shaped differently. It looks like there's divots, right? There's ditches of some sort, but it's grown over with moss. And you just sense that, oh, something really bad happened here. I would see faces sometimes. I would see faces, but I would get so scared by them that I would run off, especially when I was little. I was just so terrified. And so throughout my childhood, as I grew up in Poland, I also had more of this interest. So I would ask the elders, all the elders there when I was growing up were World War II survivors. And I would ask them, how was your experience? What do you remember about the Jewish population before the war? What do you remember about during the war? So I would ask them. And I would get certain tidbits from my family members as well. And it wasn't until later where I began getting these very vivid visions. And it would occur, like, for example, in Warsaw, there's these two buildings, at least when I went to school there, like almost 15 years ago, where it was the last remaining walls of the Jewish ghetto. And I would walk through there and I would just see this suffering. I would see it and I would feel it. And as time went on, as I really went throughout my healing journey and unpeeled the layers, knowing what was mine, what was not mine, and became less afraid of these gifts, my grandparents and great-grandparents would show me what they witnessed.
Oh, that's heavy.
And it is heavy. And it's something that a lot of people don't want to see. I said no many times.
What does it feel like when someone is showing you something that happened at a certain date, whatever it was, 70, 80 years ago? What is that like?
It depends where one is in the comfort level of their own gifts and their own healing journey. Before I accepted this part of myself, I was terrified. I would see this and I would run and I would numb it. I overworked. I was an overachiever. I partied too much. I went out too much. I did anything. I kept myself really busy. Anything to distract me from what I was seeing.
Now, at this time in your development, mediumship I'm talking about, were you able to actually turn it off at will or not necessarily?
I just ignored it, and I stuffed it down. And everyone can get addicted to something. I wasn't addicted to drugs or alcohol necessarily. I was addicted to avoiding it. Anything to not feel it, anything to not see it. And I didn't know what my tools were at the time, but that's what I did. And I stuffed it down and it was brutal.
These visions, are these included in, was it your grandmother's memoir or your great-grandmother's memoir?
My grandmother's memoir. So my maternal grandmother, at the age of 6, was deported to Siberia by the Soviet authorities in 1940 and dumped in the middle of the Siberian tundra and left to die. It was part of the gulag system. The gulag system really started in 1917 and it lasted all the way until 1990. The 1940s and World War II and 1950s was when it was most active, and it was a 3-part system. It was forced labor, so concentration camps throughout all of Siberia. It was forced farm collectivization efforts, so essentially forced labor to grow food only to then take away, which created fabricated famines to feed soldiers on the front. And then just random forced labor projects that weren't necessarily in camps, weren't necessarily on farms, and that was really to extract resources to also expand the empire and the war effort. And it affected almost 20 million people from all backgrounds, all walks of life. And when I decided to translate her memoir, it took me 10 years to really get this book from start to finish translated and then published, because there were steps in the journey when she would go through so much detail where it came out of my body, but I also did see the visions. I would see her little hands being forced to pick food or carry buckets of water where she was severely malnourished and sick with scurvy or with malaria. I would see the darkness of the homes, the dugout homes where they were forced to live in. It was every step of the way she showed me, but I had to see it in order to release it from my own body.
When you see these visions, wherever they are, does it have the effect of releasing the energy from the family's energy field, is it?
Absolutely. Remember I mentioned earlier, I would just stuff it down, just avoid, don't look at it, overwork, go achieve anything to just survive so I wouldn't have to deal with any sort of discomfort. I also didn't know how to feel my feelings either. That's another aspect of being a descendant of war survivors. War survivors need to shut down so they can survive. And that includes shutting down their own feelings. So it's not like when they have children, they're all teaching their children about emotional regulation. That's not really typical. And so I grew up in this environment where there wasn't much emotional regulation. I didn't know how to feel it. And it wasn't until I started learning how to feel my feelings and go into this healing journey where I then learned, okay, I am a medium. I'm not crazy. This isn't my imagination. I am seeing things that are significant. And that's when I learned that what my underlying beliefs were going to help me. So once I started believing that I'm not going to get hurt and I'm not going to die seeing these images or experiencing the feelings that come with it, that's when, yes, despite the discomfort of seeing horrendous images, even talking to you right now, I'm getting some flashbacks of things that my great-grandparents showed me. It's horrendous. It's horrendous. And yes, it is uncomfortable, but after I really allowed myself to see it and hold myself through it, that then I not only gained insights as to why I was overworking myself, why I was in this survival mode, why I had constant anxiety. That's when I was able to transform it. So my ancestors were showing me this because they want to help me.
They want to clear it.
They want to clear it. Yes, because they're living through me too. When I hold on to it, it's kind of ensuring they're holding on to it as well. So they want to let go.
Let's talk about the guides and your ancestors. Is there an overlap there?
Yeah, guides can be a lot of things. It can be spirit councils that is composed of celestial beings from other realms, other dimensions who've never incarnated on planet Earth. It can be human beings that you're not related to that have a specific purpose for you. Oh, I have one. Well, she just came in to me.
Just now?
Yeah, she pops in from time to time. Her name's Rochelle, and she was a slave here in Texas. I'm in Texas. I'm in Austin. She comes to me sometimes because she keeps telling me, yes, despite the suffering of my day-to-day, I wouldn't let them enslave my soul. So she comes in to remind me of that, of despite the world and the chaos it's in, don't let it steal your spirit. So she has a specific purpose for me. Then I have my ancestors, but it all depends on where someone is in their soul journey and their soul's evolution. So guides can come in and out. They can come once. You may not see them again. It depends on where you are in your development. But for my purposes, within my lineage, my ancestors have been a big part because they love me and they want me to let this go. And I signed up for this on my soul contract before I landed in this body of I'm going to clear this.
Now, the energy of the land, which we're talking about, the residual energy which is left behind in a conflict, can that influence more conflicts in the same area again?
Oh gosh, yes. Yes, I'll use Poland as an example just because that's the one that my own lived experience, but I feel this in other lands as well. So over there are certain places where when I go today, I see a bunch of spirits and I'm like, okay, I cannot move. I have to guide them to the light because it's just the right thing to do. Because if not, it affects people's energy in the culture.
What you're talking about, I believe, is an earthbound ghost that has not crossed over, right? Okay.
Yes, they have not crossed over. Yes, they're stuck. They're stuck and they need to be encouraged to go into the light because there's many spirits who are scared of it. They're like, what is this? I don't know what this is. What if I go over and I'm not able to come back? I want to check in on my wife or my son, and they're just paralyzed. So it's to encourage them to go over. When there is this paralysis, it can make people moody. It can make people dark. And I'm not surprised that, for example, after the war in Poland, for example, there was a lot of alcoholism. What else are they going to do? There's no therapist. Yes, it was what they experienced. There's no therapy. And they feel it. I'll give you another example. Have you ever walked into a room after someone fought in there? They just walked out.
We talked about this.
Yes, and you still feel like someone just fought in here.
Yeah, something bad happened here. That can be from an hour ago, a day ago, or if it's still lurking, it could have been from 40 years ago.
Or 400. It could be 400. And it's like sitting in this environment, like we are human beings where we're constantly interacting with energies, even with inanimate objects. We are beings of energy. We exchange this constantly on a day-to-day basis. And if we're in a place where the environment is dark, uncleared, it is heavy, it doesn't matter how strong your spiritual boundaries are, your energetic boundaries are, it's going to affect you because we are energy itself. And then you start just feeling like really irritable, or just, man, I don't feel like you maybe feel slow, or super moody, or just you want to cry all the time. The environment is extremely important to us, and that includes the energy there.
I wanted to ask about the soul contract. You mentioned this just a moment ago. And a lot of us do acknowledge that we made agreements before we came down in this incarnation. Do you actually remember making that agreement?
So I feel like I get tidbits of it. I feel I've had many past lives and I've had glimpses to many of them. And this is part of my own journey. I'm still discovering which past lives I've had and what I've agreed to. I would say that I didn't really get more insights into it until I started doing karmic debt clearing. So going into the past lives where my soul did not do a lot of good things and repenting for it, apologizing for it, asking for forgiveness. And that's where these visions have gotten stronger and stronger. The more clearing I have done, the more certainty I've had, and the more anchored and coherent I have felt with my own soul. And whether or not it was a certain point of time, that is something that I'm still discovering, but I know really deep in my gut that I did sign up to be a messenger and to help humanity accept more of themselves and their humanity and reconnect with their souls.
The ancestors have a lot to do with that, right?
Yes.
You had mentioned that you've been getting a lot of really intense downloads lately.
I haven't felt these kind of downloads in every cell of my body up until now. So with my book that I published, I've been working with a publisher for over a year and a half. And the way the publishing world works is there's many steps in the process. One thing is that they set the publication date. I didn't have any say in the publication date. If it was up to me, it would have been published last fall. They said, no, it's going to be March 24th, 2026. And concurrently, over the past 2 years, I have been receiving visions of like a castle. It looked like a castle with a big tower in Eastern Europe. And I look up and there's a rocket launched into the tower, and in this modern era, in this timeline. And I've received this vision for around 2 years. And for a while, I've been really deliberating within myself, like, is this just a fear I have of war coming back? And I assumed it was Warsaw because it looked very much like the royal palace courtyard in the center of Old Town there. That's where I lived. So that's where it looked the most familiar to me. So I assumed it was Warsaw. So in the back of my mind, I've been carrying this, oh shoot, maybe Warsaw's going to be attacked? Not really sure. At any rate, so then that's been happening for the past 2 years. The book publisher, Disruption, decides to give me a publication date of March 24th, 2026. The day arrives. It is a Tuesday, March 24th, 2026. I go look at the news, and I look on the screen. There's a rocket flying into the tower of an old UNESCO heritage site not in Warsaw, but in Lviv. That is one of my ancestral hometowns.
No coincidence there, right?
My maternal grandfather was from there. I have very deep roots there. I have at least 600 years of my family generations that lived and built, celebrated, married, died there for 600 years. And so to see this rocket go through in a treasured site, it felt like a knife to the heart, absolutely. And it was also so significant that the day I published a book on ancestral war trauma healing, talking about a rather unknown part of World War II history, at least in the Western world or in the English-speaking world, I just knew that was a confirmation that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And fast forward a few nights ago, I was woken up in the middle of the night, and I'm usually a very good sleeper, and I'm very good with sleep hygiene. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, but I'm pretty easy to go back to sleep. It was like at 3 a.m. It was like, Isa, get up. I have a message for you. It felt like someone was saying this to me right here. And I was like, whoa, am I dreaming? And it took me a while to be like, wait, am I dreaming? Am I having a vivid dream? Am I lucid dreaming? Nope, I was wide awake. And I got this very clear message of Europe is mobilizing. They're getting ready. And the people feel that they're getting ready for an attack beyond Ukraine. There's already shrapnel that consistently lands on the Polish side of the border. There's already drones that constantly go into EU airspace. Just the other day, the city of Vilnius, an EU capital in Lithuania, there was an air raid siren because of a drone that went in through Belarus. Belarus is a proxy of Moscow, essentially. European capital, where the population needed to go hide from air raids. Yeah, there have been fighter jets going into Belgian territory, into Dutch territory. They've been really pushing the buttons.
Just so anyone listening knows, this is being recorded May 21st of 2026, just for reference. That's a little scary, to say the least.
Oh, it is. Oh, it's very frightening, especially since 80% of my family still lives there. It's very frightening. And I got this message of, Isa, you're on the path. Do not go to Europe this summer. Focus on North America. Focus on teaching this history. Focus on the diaspora communities that have been affected by this history. Focus on helping people with any sort of ancestral war trauma clear this, because it hasn't infiltrated the Western Hemisphere just yet. And this is where I'm needed. So that's the message I've been getting, which is more of an anchoring of listening to my soul and doing something about it. It's one thing to receive the message and then doing something about it.
Okay. The mission that you're on with your brand of mediumship, do you suppose the average medium is involved with energy clearing and releasing energy such as what you're describing tonight, or not necessarily?
I think it just depends on the medium. I would say the most traditional form of mediumship is where they have a very clear, direct message from a loved one or someone that has passed on that wants to meet someone specific. Clairvoyance lean on certain senses more so than others. So for me, I see images through my mind's eye. I don't see people in like 3D necessarily. I see it very much in my mind's eye. I see colors. I see auras. I also very much feel someone's physical health within my body as well, but not other mediums do. There's mediums who just know, it drops as a download in their head and they just know. I also hear voices. Some don't hear voices. So it really depends on the individual. And that's what's beautiful about consciousness, is that it is represented through an infinite array of communication methods and styles.
Okay. Since we've been talking about energy for this evening's session, you believe that mediumship, speaking of which, can actually help bridge the gap between the masculine and the feminine.
Yes, 100%.
How exactly would that work?
Yeah. For example, right now, the masculine and the feminine are going through massive changes, right? The feminine has been reclaiming her power and her worth and redefining herself and saying, okay, this is what I deserve, and I deserve this devotion, but also softening into it. So it's like she's reclaiming her power and then relearning what it is to be feminine again. And men are learning, what does this mean for me? And it can cause a lot of confusion in the present day, and it does. Men and women, the masculine and the feminine right now, are going through a massive stage of kind of relearning who they are and how to talk to each other. And one real life example that I have is for women, as they go and evolve here, they have to learn how to trust again. And that comes from feeling unsafe due to their experience with the masculine for so long.
And the patriarchy.
Yes, exactly.
Does this have anything to do with moving into the Aquarian age, making this shift into the new earth?
It absolutely does. The patriarchy hasn't really been helping anybody.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't serve men either. Because when men can't really be in tune with themselves and play a role, it doesn't serve them either. And if it comes at the cost of suppressing a woman's expression, it's the same form of repression, for both sides.
So how do you explain that to someone who's maybe not in tune with all things metaphysical in really plain terms?
Honestly, I think it's really simple. I think it's just teaching people how to feel their feelings.
That's simple.
I think it's that simple. It's just asking people how they feel and teaching them emotional regulation. It is insane to me how many humans in society don't actually allow themselves to feel.
You live here in the States. You live in
Yes.
Texas. I live in South Florida. Without going too far down the rabbit hole, we are seeing a lot of gaslighting. Some of us, not all of us, are watching this and thinking, how can this be happening? These people should be smarter to know they're being lied to, and this is corruption. Is that what you're hinting at, is where some people won't allow themselves to feel?
And knowing where the feeling is coming from, who is experiencing that. And that's where consciousness comes in, of saying, okay, I'll give you an example. I felt very unsafe in my body for most of my life. I had severe anxiety. I was very afraid of being seen. I was distrusting, especially of men. And throughout my healing journey, and this is something my ancestors have helped me through the visions of, I was untrusting because so many women within my lineage were abused. They had men be conscripted onto armies, left vulnerable, and then they were taken advantage of by other armies for generations.
And that's where the generational influence comes. And do you think it actually becomes, I don't know, coded into our DNA?
Oh, the distrust and lack of safety, absolutely. That's where, when one feels unsafe, they get defensive or they hide. Either way, they're not being the true expressions of themselves. They're not really going to say how they feel. They're going to be too afraid of even feeling what they're feeling. And it wasn't until throughout my whole healing journey and then going through my lived experience and why I didn't trust, and then seeing, for example, my grandmother on the step alone as a little girl with no men to help her, no protection, right? Of course she's going to be afraid of men. And also, she's going to be afraid that she's not going to have a man in her life, and that's going to leave her vulnerable and exposed.
And that's going to go down throughout the generations. Right. Okay. All right.
But it also is helpful, as you learn about this, to then look at the other side. So I would also see men in my lineage forced to be conscripted into an army, forced to do things that they couldn't do, and the shame they felt of the powerlessness of being unable to protect their wives, their daughters, their mothers, right? This internalized shame. Yes. And that causes feeling of low self-worth. So being able to identify where an energy or reaction is coming from, that's key. That can be ancestral. And that's where it can be relived in the contemporary times.
Why is it really critically important to be doing the work you're doing now, here, today, in 2026?
Oof. Things haven't been quite working out for humans, like, ideally.
Not really.
Or not really. We have gotten to the point where we have overconsumed the resources of our planet Earth, which is where we live and where we sustain life from. We have over-extracted resources. We have disrespected Mother Earth to a point where how is planet Earth going to look like in the next decade or so? It's not looking great. It's an absolute mess. If we keep going with the way we're going, we're all going to implode or we're all going to kill each other. Mother Earth is going to be fine. We're the ones I'm worried about.
We haven't talked about the celestial beings yet, and it might be a story for another day, but with the framework of where the civilization is now here on Earth, do you get the feeling, or have you had communication from these celestial beings that they're going to step in and help, or not really?
Yeah, they have been helping. The overarching and overwhelming message I've been getting as a foundation is oracles and seers and shamans that have represented many indigenous lineages all around the world from thousands of years ago felt, oh, this is not going on a good path for humanity. There's way too many battles, way too much infighting, there's way too many wars. The energies are off. The energies have been off for a while, for a long time. And anytime our ancestors within ceremonies or prayer circles prayed to the heavens, prayed to Mother Gaia for help, the messages have been received by celestial beings. And they've come. They're already here to help. We've been asking for this help for a long time, and they're finally here to help. The scary part is that there's other sorts of beings that have also been hearing this.
Okay, I know where you're going, and we're just at about time for today, but I do think this installment will be continued. What else do we need to know on the topic, at least for tonight?
You can learn more about channelings through my Substack called Neverbroken, and you can also buy my book, A Polish Girl in Siberia, as well.
Isabella, thanks again for joining us tonight. I think we are going to have a second installment so the story can continue. But in the meantime, our listeners can find you at your website. Can I have that once more?
Yes, isaclarahealing.com.
You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, you can find more info on closertovenus.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.